Hello my perfectly pampered cooks. I am going to make for you today my version of Olive Garden's pasta fagioli soup. I'm going to flip the camera around and go over the ingredients before I get started cooking. Okay guys, I'm going to go ahead and get started, and I am taking my sweet Italian sausage and I'm going to add it to a large pot that is over medium-low heat. You don't want it to be screaming hot because you don't want all of that grease to go flying all over the place. This is just sweet Italian sausage. It's in the case. You can find it that's already ground, but they didn't have any at my grocery store, so I went ahead and got it in the casing, and that's not a big deal because we're just going to pop the casing off. You're going to need a pound. This is 1.15 pounds. So as long as you have a minimum of a pound, and this is the bag it came in, and I'm going to use this as my trash bag. It's such a time saver. So don't just throw this away automatically. Use it for your scraps. That way you're not making multiple trips to the trash bin. So all I'm going to do is take our sweet Italian sausage link and cut it down the middle just so I can open it up a little bit and peel off the casing, and then it's going straight into my pot, which is heating up right now. It should be warm but not screaming hot. So I'm just going to do that with all of these. Now I'm using sweet Italian sausage. If you want something a little more zesty, then go ahead and get mild Italian sausage or even spicy Italian sausage. It's all taste preference. If you don't have any of those, you can just buy plain sausage and season it to your liking. You could add just regular seasonal. You could use the Pampered Chef Italian seasoning blend. You could go a completely different direction and use the sausage in a Southwest flavor. We have a Southwest seasoning that would be really good. Into my trash bag. Okay, so now that we've got the sausage in the pan that's still warming, we're just going to take our mix and chop, ta-da, favorite tool, and we are just going to mash up our sausage until it's nice and finely ground. So you want to make sure that it's not clumpy. It needs to be finely chopped. So you're going for this kind of consistency where it's nice and loose. Some chunks are okay, but you don't want huge chunks like this. Okay, so our sausage is browning, and as it goes, I just kind of like to mash it down some more and break it up. So while the sausage is browning, we're going to do our vegetables. So what I did was I took two pretty large carrots, peeled them and halved them and then quartered them. And I put them in the spiral and slice. And what it's going to produce, let's get it on here. So we're getting these nice half-moon shapes. And the reason I'm using this instead of chopping these by hand is because when I use this, I get the same thickness consistently, which is what you want, because when you're cooking, you want everything to be the same size and thickness so it all will cook at the same speed. You get nice big, I might not actually need both of those. Vegetables are to your liking. I like a lot of veggies in mine. This carrot might be just enough though, which is okay because my daughter, Lorelai, will eat the others when she gets home from school. So yeah, I think that's good for carrot. If you want more vegetables, by all means, add more. So now that those are done, I'm going to move on to the onion. which all I'm doing is cutting off the ends. And this is a pretty big onion. It's a Vidalia onion. They tend to be fairly large. So I think I'm going to only need about half of this onion. Let's see what it looks like with the skin off. Put all my scraps in my trash bag. They're out of the way. And we're going to chop our meat down a little bit more. So once this meat is nice and broken up and browned, we're going to actually set it aside, and we're going to add our onions and carrots to the pot where the sausage was cooking with just a touch of olive oil, so we can get those veggies nice and soft. It still has a minute or two to go. So what I'm going to do with this onion is I'm going to cut it in half. It's a pretty substantial size onion, so I'm only going to use half. I'm going to cut the half in half, and then I'm going to actually cut it into 6. And what I'm going to do with that is put it in our manual food processor. This is great if you want to do super fine for your onions. You could also use the food chopper. My preference is the manual food processor just because it's a finer dice out of it. That's what I like. So you're going to pulse this to your desired consistency. If you like it thicker, then by all means, use the food chopper, or don't pulse this as much. For your specifications, I prefer really finely diced onions, as does the rest of my family. I'm kind of an onion fanatic, and garlic. Everybody says I go overboard on garlic. So you could actually stop here if you wanted to. I'm going to take mine just a little bit further. That's where I'm going to stop with mine. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to set this aside for a minute, and I'm going to drain our sausage and set it aside and come back. Okay, so our veggies are nice and soft. And before I add anything else in, I'm going to add 3 cloves of garlic using our wonderful garlic press. Garlic, again, this is totally personal preference. I happen to love garlic. Other people, not so much. If you ask my husband, I use way too much garlic and onion. But he never complains about my cooking, just the smell of it sometimes. So I would say at minimum use 1 good sized clove. I think that's a pretty good sized clove. If you have smaller cloves, then you may want to use 2. If you really like garlic like I do, you're using 3 good sized cloves. Also, if you really just you're not a garlic lover, but you want the flavor from the garlic, you can always use garlic powder, probably about a teaspoon of garlic powder. And what's great about doing the garlic press, or you could even take the microplane and grate it into the soup, because it's so fine, when it comes out, it basically just dissolves. So you don't get chunks of garlic. And I just want to stir that around. And I'm going to add our sausage back in. juices and all. Stir that around. Alright, so now we are going to start adding our liquids for our soup. I've got 1 cup of water and 3 cups of chicken broth. And if you are watching your sodium, then I suggest that you use reduced sodium or no sodium chicken broth. That way you can taste as you go. Next thing we are going to add is a 14.5 ounce can of diced tomatoes. Stir that up, and 1 15-ounce can of tomato sauce. And we're going to give that a really good stir, make sure everything is nice and mixed. I'm going to put the lid on and bring this up to a boil. And when it comes up to a boil, we are going to add our cannellini beans and our kidney beans and our pasta. So as far as the beans go, you can go a couple of ways. You can do the canned beans like I'm doing. Just make sure when you open the can, you put them in a sieve and rinse them, or you can buy the dried beans and soak them overnight. If you're going to soak them overnight, normally like when I make red beans and rice, I have the red beans and I soak them in either chicken stock or water with chicken granules to give them some flavor as they rehydrate. For this, because there's the tomato sauce and the diced tomatoes and the chicken broth in there, you may want to just soak them in water so it doesn't get too salty. So we've got the lid on. We're going to let this come to a boil. When it comes to a boil, we're going to add our beans and pasta, and then we are done. Alright guys, this has been boiling for about 10 minutes. I let it go a little bit longer because in the end I decided to add some more carrots to it. So now that this is all nice and smelling delicious, I'm going to add the red kidney beans that I drained and rinsed, and the cannellini beans. Cannellini beans are really thick, so they don't always want to come out. And then 1 cup of pasta. And you're going to heat it for like 5 minutes, just until the pasta's done. Okay guys, this is the finished product. I ended up letting mine go for about 10 minutes just because the pasta wasn't quite where I wanted it at. Now you might look at this and think that this is kind of thin compared to Olive Garden's pasta fagioli. If it's too thin for you, you can do a couple of things. You can take your spoon and you can smash some of those beans. The beans will release their starches and it'll help thicken the soup. Or if you really think it's way, way, way too thin, you can do a slurry of water and cornstarch. And just mix the water with like a teaspoon. Do like 2 tablespoons of water and half a teaspoon to a teaspoon of cornstarch, and just drizzle it in there slowly. And the other thing to keep in mind is the pasta is still pretty regular in size. As it sits, it's going to release more starch and it's going to plump, because remember, you're not draining this pasta, so all that starch is going to be in the soup. So if you're good with this consistency, then go ahead and serve it up now. I'm going to let mine sit a little bit and let those starches work to thicken.